David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Hey everybody, I am genuinely glad that you are with me today. Even the trolls who are going to send me really angry messages. We have big news today in the category of this might make Trump lose his mind, as I call it. Donald Trump's oldest son, Donald Trump Jr., has been subpoenaed to testify by the Senate Intelligence Committee. And it's important to remember that Republicans control the Senate, and therefore they control the Senate Intelligence Committee. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee is Republican Richard Burr, but it has actually been, that committee, one of the few places where there seems to be some sort of bipartisan logic in dealing with the fiasco that is Donald Trump. And specifically, the Senate Intelligence Committee wants Donald Trump Jr. to show up and under oath to answer questions about what were obviously lies the last time he testified before the committee, related to his involvement in the Trump Tower Moscow deal, which ultimately didn't end up going forward. And Donald Trump Jr. previously testified about that issue, and he lied. I mean, he claimed that he had limited knowledge about that project. He claimed that there was never really a plan. It was never really anything more than a notion that Michael Cohen thought up and never really touched Donald Trump Jr. in any way. But unfortunately, since Donald Trump Jr. told those lies to the Senate Intel Committee, we found out that Jr. was lying. There were significant plans for Trump Tower Moscow. A site had been selected. A builder had been selected. There were architectural plans. There were many meetings about it. And maybe most importantly, as it relates to Trump Jr.'s involvement individually, we heard from Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, who's now in prison, that he was personally briefing both Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump and others about this Trump Tower Moscow project. And he talked about it happening at least or roughly 10 times. Here's just like a few seconds from that testimony under questioning from Congressman Stephen Lynch with his delightful Boston accent.
Who were the family members that you briefed on the Trump Tower Moscow project?
Don Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump.
Okay. Now, were these in the regular course of business, or did the president or family request the briefings?
This is the regular course of business.
Do you recall, there's a question on the number of briefings. Do you recall how many there might have been?
I'm sorry, sir?
Do you recall how many of these briefings there might have been?
Approximately 10 in total.
All right.
This is the opposite of what Donald Trump Jr. said under oath, and now the leaders of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who don't like being lied to, including Republican Richard Burr, ranking member Democrat Mark Warner, they want Donald Trump Jr. to show up again. Now, the fact that there is even a subpoena is significant here, because it implies that Donald Trump Jr. already either ignored or rejected a non-subpoena request to appear, which arguably forced the committee to issue the subpoena if they actually are determined to get him to answer questions once again. And so this is newsworthy for a few different reasons. One of those is that, again, this is a Republican-led committee. And last night I was wondering, is this going to cause infighting between Trump and his administration and the Republicans in the Senate? And it immediately has. A source close to Donald Trump Jr. has said to CNBC that this is, quote, an obvious PR stunt from a so-called Republican senator. If you want the truth from Trump Jr., if you don't want him lying, you now are apparently only a so-called Republican, according to individuals close to Donald Trump Jr. So the infighting is starting right away. The expectation is that Trump Jr. is going to fight this subpoena if possible. And the funniest little game they're playing is the following. CNBC is reporting that the person close to Trump Jr., who is commenting about this, says, Don is a private citizen now who has already been cleared by special counsel Robert Mueller after a 2-year investigation. Are they really that dumb? Because there are endless other investigations. What I and others said as soon as the Mueller investigation wrapped up was there are 12 to 14, maybe even more, depending on sort of where the lines are between investigations. There are more than a dozen other investigations. This isn't the end. They're going to keep talking to witnesses. And a lot of people on the right said, David, come on, it's over. This is it. There's nothing else. And then now, as we see, the Senate Intelligence Committee wants Donald Trump Jr. back. And the argument they're making is he's already been cleared by Robert Mueller. That's one of like 15 different investigations that are going on. The Mueller probe was one thing. Did they really think that it was all just going to go away with the submission of the Mueller report? Or is this also a PR game that they are playing more to curry favor with the public than to actually convince anybody who's in a position of power? I don't know. But the most important takeaway here is for a Republican-led committee to subpoena the son of a Republican president in the middle of all the chaos that's going on right now with the Mueller report, with William Barr, they must believe that Donald Trump Jr. lied to them. Senators don't like being lied to. If there's one, so if we think about like the different echelons of priority among egotistical elected officials, very high on the list is they don't like their power questioned. And that is very much entangled with their partisanship. They want to be loyal to their party. One of the things that will more quickly than almost anything else get Democrats and Republicans united against some third party is if they feel that their position of authority and power has not been respected, and showing up and under oath lying to them, which is what there is every indication Donald Trump Jr. did, is a really quick way to get Republicans and Democrats working together. I hope that he shows up. If he fights the subpoena, we will report it, and we will tell you what ultimately happens with this. I've said it before, and I will say it again. For a document summarizing an investigation that supposedly totally clears the president, no collusion, no obstruction, witch hunt, presidential harassment, all that stuff, Trump's going crazy to prevent the release of the document, which supposedly totally exonerates him. And the big news that we learned from yesterday is that Donald Trump is asserting now executive privilege over the entire unredacted Mueller report. Understand the sort of process that this has gone through. Trump's Attorney General William Barr released a redacted version of the Mueller report a couple of weeks ago. And even in its redacted form, it was absolutely devastating to Trump. It cited, quote, substantial evidence of obstruction of justice. It found it could not exonerate Donald Trump from obstruction of justice. It found that of the 14 different possible instances of obstruction, all 3 legal requirements were met in 8 of those 14 possible obstructive acts. That's really, really bad. But this was only the redacted version of the report, and Democrats have been working to get their hands on the unredacted version of the report because there was so much blacked out material in that redacted version. Pages and pages. Some pages have almost nothing other than like the number of a footnote visible and the source of the footnote, everything else completely blacked out. So Democrats understandably are thinking, if the redacted version is this devastating to Donald Trump and the people around him, we've got to get our hands on an unredacted version. And William Barr has been resisting that. He has been going out of his way to stonewall those requests at every opportunity. And now that it's starting to look a little dicey for William Barr, Trump has asserted executive privilege over the entire report in order to hide those redacted portions. Before we go any further, what is executive privilege? Executive privilege is the privilege claimed by the president for the executive branch of the United States government. And that's key because it relates to co-equal branches of government. It's the privilege of withholding information in the public interest. This is all coming to a head because House Democrats are looking at holding Attorney General William Barr in contempt of Congress for his refusal to release to them the unredacted version of the report. Trump jumping in now and asserting executive privilege is an attempt to preempt this and get around the entire conversation about contempt of Congress by William Barr. And the crazy thing about this is that the report has endless evidence of obstruction, which his attorney general, Trump's attorney general, William Barr, is refusing to release, which is another obstructive act. In other words, Barr is obstructing in order to prevent more evidence of Trump's obstruction to be public, which now Donald Trump is compounding by asserting executive privilege, which is in and of itself another obstructive act, although unlikely to be one that rises to the level of criminality. What does Sarah Huckabee Sanders say about all of this? She's saying that the people breaking the law are the members of the House who are trying to do oversight. Take a look at this quote where she said yesterday, "The American people see through Chairman Nadler's desperate ploy to distract from the president's historically successful agenda," that's a lie, "and our booming economy. Neither the White House nor Attorney General Barr will comply with Chairman Nadler's unlawful and reckless demands. Nothing unlawful about them. Reckless is, of course, subjective. Faced with Chairman Nadler's blatant abuse of power, there is no such abuse, and at the Attorney General's request, the president has no other option than to make a protective assertion of executive privilege." Almost nothing that she said is true. I think we could agree that she used exclusively words from the English language. Beyond that, I don't think I would agree about anything in that statement with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. The president's agenda is not historically successful. The demands from the House are not unlawful. They're proper legal requests. I don't even want to talk about the Mueller report itself here, because this is about a much bigger crisis. The administration has flouted what is supposed to be balanced power and checks and balances as established by the founders of the United States of America. Republican indifference is allowing this to continue. Co-equal branches of government, right? That requires that when Trump disregards the framework of how those checks and balances work, the House and Senate need to balance it out and go beyond partisanship. But Republicans simply refuse. The Attorney General says Trump can legally stop any investigation into himself. The Justice Department says you can't, or you don't, or you shouldn't indict a sitting president of the United States. What matters is they won't do it. This is not presidential harassment. This is a de facto presidential immunity that goes completely outside what the founders of the country actually wanted and intended. If we care about what the founders wanted and intended, which the constitutional conservative right claims to, you have to call this out as sickening. You have to call Republicans out for standing by and implicitly rubber stamping it by their inaction. And it has to end in one way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, the most direct path to ending it is probably going out and voting Trump out in November of 2020, because there's no evidence anyone in power on the Republican side is going to actually take any decisive action here. And that's maybe the biggest tragedy of it all. That goes beyond the content of the Mueller report. It goes beyond Trump's 14 potentially obstructive acts. It's more about what does this mean about the basic foundations our country is built on. And I see it going nowhere, quite frankly. If you disagree with me, let me know. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let me say a quick thank you to today's new David Pakman Show member of the day, Alec Vanderpool. Alec is the latest person to say, I value independent progressive media. I understand that without support from the audience, shows like ours will go away, or at least they will be significantly weakened. And Alec went to www.joinpakman.com and signed up for a membership, which is a really great thing, getting a whole bunch of great member benefits. Today's longtime sustaining member of the day is Isabel Saveland. Isabel has been a member for almost 5 years, dating all the way back to 2014. Alec and Isabel, I really appreciate your support. It means a lot to me, and I hope you'll join them by signing up at joinpakman.com. The regular prices are more than a good deal, but if they are a bit high for your current budget, no problem. The coupon code THISIS2020 will cut 40% off of the cost of any membership. And I encourage you to support the program if you're able and if you find it a valuable media resource. We are very close to 10,000 subscribers to the David Pakman Show subreddit at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. A lot of great stuff there. I want to point out a few interesting threads I spotted this morning. One is of a viewer who says, Is David religious? David sure talks a lot about being Jewish, but I'm disappointed that someone as intelligent as him may actually believe in the religious nonsense of Abrahamic religions. No, I'm not religious. As I've said before, I'm ethnically Jewish, 100%, according to my Ancestry.com and 23andMe DNA test. If some people don't know that Judaism is an ethno-religious group, there is an ethnicity and there is a religion. If you are ethnically Jewish, you can believe or not believe in the religious part. If you convert to Judaism religiously, you are religiously Jewish, but that obviously doesn't change your ethnicity. So I'm ethnically Jewish. I identify with Jewish cultural history, etc., but I am not personally a religious person. No, if that would be concerning to you, let me allay your fears. I am not a religious person. Another post, the Sam Seder ripoff is getting out of control. This is so funny. There are a whole bunch of, and I posted these to the David Pakman Show Instagram and to my own. There are a bunch of Photoshops being done that make our set look even more like Sam Seder's set. And someone actually digitally added glasses to my face that look like Sam's and also gave me a receding hairline, digitally, of course, which I don't even actually know that Sam has a receding hairline. When I sent him the image, he found it funny. And I said, I don't actually think you have that receding hairline. He said he does. And it is, don't worry, I'm not going to be going out of my way to adopt more elements of Sam Seder's look, if anyone is concerned that we're going in that direction. Also from the David Pakman Show subreddit, some of you may have noticed that on Monday, we launched a new thumbnail design for our YouTube and Facebook video thumbnails. If you listen to the podcast or watch the show on TV or listen on the radio, you wouldn't even notice this. But for those who have, I did get a post on the subreddit saying that the new thumbnails are less appealing. One of our users does not like the new thumbnails. And fortunately, most people do. And I really like them. I think it's a great new design developed by David Pakman Show producer and business development associate Noah Ferguson. And the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. And, I always have to remember, anytime we change anything on the show, I will disproportionately hear from people who dislike it. And that's just the nature of feedback and reviews. It's a phenomenon that's widely sort of explored on the internet. And in this case, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. So accounting for the fact that people who hate something are much more likely to reach out to me, I am confident that in total, the new thumbnails are a good thing and they're looking really good. Join the discussion at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. Nearly 10,000 of our viewers and listeners are now participating in political discussions there. The discussions are moderated to ensure that there is not bullying and toxicity that we don't look at very kindly at the David Pakman Show. So you can be confident that your ideas will be welcomed respectfully. And if they aren't, you let me know personally and I'll make sure that that's taken care of. Okay, we've been talking about these sort of like 4 meta issues in American politics for a while now. One of those is climate change. Climate change, if we don't deal with it, it impacts everything else that we care about. If your city's underwater, it's hard to be an activist for education policy, is the way I like to sort of apply a metaphor or an example to it. Net neutrality and internet freedom is another meta issue. We learn about most of what's going on in the world through the news media and through the internet and through websites and from news stations that are so impacted by net neutrality and internet freedom. So that's another meta issue that affects a lot of what we care about. Our electoral system is a third. The fact that we have an electoral college and everything that connects to that, including voter suppression, voter ID, the way votes are counted, the way primaries are handled, all of that stuff. So the electoral system would be like meta issue number 3. And then you've got campaign finance, which rounds out the list, the way politics is financed in the United States. A big part of campaign finance is Citizens United. Now, it's not the only part. It's not the only reason why we have the system of campaign finance that we have today, but it is a big part of it. And Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff has now introduced a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Citizens United is the 2010 Supreme Court decision that did away with corporate campaign spending restrictions. And if this constitutional amendment were ratified, it would allow limits to be put back in place by Congress and by states on the contributions that companies can make. And it would let states decide if, for example, they want to make public financing of elections the law of the land. So this is huge. It's great news. It's the right thing. We should support it. But there are caveats. Caveat number one is this is going nowhere for as long as Republicans control the Senate and for as long as a Republican is in the White House. That's number one. But it's still good to get this going. And I support Adam Schiff doing it because we've been talking about a constitutional amendment for a long time. At the same time, it's really important to understand, and this is a great opportunity to do it, that there are many other things we can do to deal with the money in politics status quo, which is a disaster in the United States, that are separate from the repeal of Citizens United. Number one, we can change our voting system in ways that would be a huge step in the right direction. Some of the specifics about how that can be done, we've talked about on the show already. The point is that's totally separate from Citizens United, and it could lead to significant improvements in the sort of election status quo of the United States of America. Number two, we could get rid of the Electoral College. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is about 70% of the way to achieving 270 electoral votes, which would allow, with no change to the Constitution, a de facto national popular vote. That's something else we can continue working on. Number three, gerrymandering. Yes, gerrymandering is connected to money in politics, but gerrymandering is also connected to many other things, including the census, which is upcoming in 2020, and in general, doing redistricting with a nonpartisan or bipartisan commissions, sometimes employing particular mathematical algorithms rather than the whimsy of individual partisan lawmakers. There's a lot that can be done with gerrymandering that doesn't require repealing Citizens United. Dealing with voter suppression tactics. This includes everything from voter ID, limiting early voting, reducing the number of polling places, on and on and on. We've talked about all of those things. Yes, a lot of that connects to Citizens United and how politics is financed, but we can also accomplish a lot independently on that. But all of this is really to build on fixing money in politics. It's not instead of fixing money in politics. So we do need to get rid of Citizens United, but it's also really important to understand that in the 9 years since Citizens United became the law of the land, it has opened the door to a lot of other incremental changes. Citizens United in and of itself is not the change that needs to be undone. It's a big change that needs to be undone, but it has opened the door to a lot of little changes, getting rid of restrictions on what's called express advocacy, allowing electioneering by more organizations, which in and of itself led to the creation of many super PACs and lots of other things. So obviously, Citizens United allowed a lot of these other things to take place. But what we need to not forget is that even if we were to overturn Citizens United, by whatever means it's ultimately overturned, if it ever is, you still need to undo a lot of that other stuff that came from the Citizens United ruling. And that's a major uphill battle. It's worth doing. It's not impossible. But understand that even the Citizens United repeal is one step of probably hundreds just in that pillar of the broader total reforms that we're advocating for. So good for Adam Schiff. This is the right thing. We should push for it. We should support it. But let's not overstate its importance. And most importantly, let's remember that there are, like 6 or 7 other areas that we can be working on right now simultaneously while we push for getting the Senate back and getting the White House back, which will at least make the path to repealing Citizens United easier. The Supreme Court that Donald Trump has appointed 2 justices to will be an impediment, even if Democrats do take over the Senate and the White House, but that'll be a problem. That'll be a bridge we cross when we come to it. There are way more things that we can be working on simultaneously related to fixing elections in American politics. Let me know what you think about this. The David Pakman Show Instagram page @David Pakman Show has a post about this. While you're there, follow me on Instagram as well @David.Pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome back to the program today Allan Lichtman, who is a political historian and professor at American University in Washington, D.C. He is also author of the book, The Case for Impeachment. Professor Lichtman, great to have you back today.
My great pleasure.
So, let's just jump right into it. At the end of 2018, you were quoted as saying you believe Donald Trump will be impeached during 2019. You've been talking about the case for impeachment for a couple of years now since your book came out. Do you still believe this is going to happen?
I do believe it's going to happen, but the Democrats have to get a little bit of a backbone. Look, I love Jerry Nadler, the head of the House Judiciary Committee. He was my high school debate partner back in the 1960s. But I hate the way he is equivocating, backing and filling, putting his finger in the political winds. The same with Nancy Pelosi, the House leader. Look, Nadler said we're in a constitutional crisis. I agree. But there is a constitutional remedy, and that is impeachment. The U.S. House has the sole authority for impeachment, and the founders advisedly put impeachment into the Constitution, not as some catastrophe, but as a legal, peaceful, and orderly means for dealing with a rogue leader, as opposed to the way they dealt with them in their own time, assassination or revolution. And there are so many grounds on which to begin an impeachment investigation. Of course, obstruction of justice, which was articles voted against Richard Nixon in the Judiciary Committee, against Bill Clinton by the full House. Of course, abuse of power, failure to honor legal subpoenas, violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, and probably financial crimes, including illegally using his charity to promote his election and perhaps corrupting the inaugural committee. And of course, we still don't know whether or not he's compromised by the Russians. That should be more than enough to begin an impeachment investigation. You don't wait until you have all the evidence, like they seem to be saying. An impeachment investigation is designed to bring out the evidence, and you're much more likely to get your subpoenas honored when they are directly related to the sole constitutional function of the House.
Okay, so let's split this into 3 steps, just so you, I, and the audience are all clear about which one you are predicting will be reached. If we imagine it in the following way, step 1 is the House formally starts debate and investigation of potential impeachment articles. Number 2 would be the House actually files those impeachment articles. And number 3 would be the Senate actually votes to convict on impeachment and remove the president. Which exactly is it you're predicting we're going to see?
By the way, you've missed maybe the most important step there. And everybody does. No. It's not just
That's
you.
Not good.
Once a House votes an article or more of impeachment, yes, the Senate does not vote. Rather, a trial is held.
Yes.
The Senate, automatically, presided over not by Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, but by Chief Justice John Roberts. This is critical because this is formal and focused. And in a trial, the House prosecutors, smart people like Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff, get to point an accusing finger at the president to present their case, and his lawyers have to defend him with credible arguments and evidence, not just spin, and the focus of the nation will be upon this.
So of the 4 steps, now that you have very politely added one in between the second and third ones I outlined, which level of that 4-step process are you actually predicting here?
I'm predicting the impeachment and the trial. But as I said, I have been bitterly disappointed by the lack of a spine on the part of House Democrats. I don't know what they're afraid of. Impeachment is the only way to hold this president accountable. And it's the only way they're ever going to get the evidence they need to look into various allegations of misdeeds. Look, history does not celebrate Richard the faint-hearted or Catherine the cautious. History celebrates those who are courageous and bold enough to meet the challenges of their time. And if the Democrats don't act, they will become worse enablers of Donald Trump than the Republicans.
So let's go through all of the devil's advocate arguments here. One is that it could go a different way for Democrats, that actually moving forward on impeachment, when we have every sense that Republicans would never actually vote to convict in the Senate, could potentially backfire on Democrats in 2020 and embolden Donald Trump. What do you say?
Incorrect. That's based on a misreading of the impeachment of Bill Clinton back in the late 1990s, when Democrats are now tearing their hair. Look, there was a backlash against the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and Republicans lost some seats in the midterm elections of 1998. Yeah, they lost a few House seats. They kept control of the House, but it gave them a vastly bigger prize, the presidency. George W. Bush won the presidency in 2000 by 537 votes in Florida, at a time when the vote for Al Gore was blunted by the cloud of scandal, and the Democrats' best campaigner by far, Bill Clinton, was kept on the shelf. Certainly, Bill Clinton could have turned more than 537 votes for Gore if he had campaigned in Florida. Moreover, my keys to the presidency, which accurately predicted against all the polls and the pundits Trump's victory in 2016, has as one of the critical keys the scandal key. You turn the scandal key, that diminishes the prospects of Trump to be reelected, and nothing else has any consequences. And by the way, we have no idea what the Senate might do after a trial. One of the Lichtman rules of politics is, for incumbent office holders, their top priority, maybe their only priority, is survival. They may not be willing to go down with Donald Trump.
When you talk about the Clinton circumstances and how they differ from the circumstances today, is that a part of, I mean, I guess I don't know if you've already analyzed the 2020 re-election campaign and whether the impeachment question is one of the ones that your prediction will hinge on, or if you believe that you are ready to make a 2020 prediction outside of that.
I'm not ready to make a 2020 prediction, but I am willing to say, absent turning the scandal key through impeachment, as of this moment, Donald Trump is favored to be reelected in 2020. In other words, the Democrats are going down the same rat hole they went down in 2016, believing the pundits, believing the polls. When will they ever learn? Plus, Pelosi says, oh, the way to win is not by going after Trump, but to go down the center line with a centrist candidate. Guess what? If that was the way to win, Hillary Clinton should have won in a landslide. She was the most centrist candidate you can get. And the Democrats have nominated lots of centrist candidates. John Kerry, Al Gore, Mike Dukakis, and guess what they all had in common? Every one of them lost.
So is that advice that the Democratic primary should be looking to someone who is more progressive this time around?
Not necessarily more progressive, but more exciting. One of my keys is charisma, someone who can really excite the electorate the way John F. Kennedy did in 1960 or Barack Obama in 2000. It's rare. It's a once-in-a-generation thing. But I hate to say this because I'm big on the issues. Issues are totally irrelevant. No election has ever turned, quote, unquote, on the issues. When Ronald Reagan, in 1984, won in a huge landslide, Mondale won only his home state of Minnesota. If you took a poll on the issues, the Democrats were ahead.
Well, so I think there's a difference between, let's see if we can break that down a little bit. I think you're right that very often the minutia of issues is not super relevant. So like as an example, Donald Trump, by those who voted for him, was seen very favorably generally on trade. Most of the people who thought that don't know the first thing about trade. They don't really understand NAFTA. They don't even really know what it is that Donald Trump was proposing, but they saw him favorably in some kind of general sense on the issue. So might it be more accurate to say that it's less about the particulars of the policy you're proposing than the perception that you're going to take care of a particular issue, like that still does seem to matter to me.
Couldn't agree with you more, David. You're very sure. Even I don't understand trade. I'm not sure anyone understands trade, to be honest with you. You're absolutely right. Part of being charismatic is making people believe, and I hope genuinely, that you're really going to improve their lives. And beyond that, that you inspire them to something beyond the everyday humdrum of their lives. And the big picture on the issues does matter. People do not follow the minutia of the issues.
So maybe an analogy would be, if you believe generally that Bernie Sanders, for example, just to pick someone, is going to make healthcare more affordable and more accessible, whether it's expanding Medicare or putting in a public option or creating a system similar to the one in the UK, like that level of specificity is less relevant than the perception that on that issue, Bernie Sanders is going to improve your life.
Absolutely. But it's got to be delivered with verve and style, and people have to believe it. We need someone who's capable of inspiration. All of the centrist, experienced, non-inspirational Democratic candidates, and I've given you a list of most of them, every one of them has lost. Who of the Democrats have won? They're all Democrats. Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, candidates who offered something new and different and exciting and weren't just another cog in the establishment.
So to get back as we get sort of toward the end of our time, the end of our time together, it sounds like you're saying if Democrats don't impeach, the most likely scenario is Trump re-election. I mean, is it that binary in your mind?
Well, nothing is binary, but that's where things stand now. Obviously, it's a long time to go and things can change. Here's the worst case scenario for the Democrats. They don't impeach. Donald Trump is reelected. So Donald Trump is empowered for another 4 years to undermine our Constitution, our freedoms, our liberty, and our national security. And every future president is empowered to do that, and Democrats will be reviled by history. And instead, they have an opportunity to seize the moment, to be Richard the Lion-hearted, not Richard the Chicken-hearted.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm having a hard time getting away from the impeachment thing, because I can understand arguments that it's possible, like I know you disagree, it's possible that there could be unforeseen strategic issues with a failed impeachment attempt. I understand that we could make the argument that, hey, maybe Mike Pence could actually get more damaging things done. That's a debate that could be had. But I kind of go back to, if not now, when? Like, if this doesn't justify it, then what are we saying about the checks and balances and infrastructure that the founders established for the United States? We're sort of saying it's presidential immunity. If
we don't move now, we have taken 2 giant steps towards autocracy in this country. If what this president has done does not justify even an impeachment inquiry, then what possibly could? We've pretty much empowered our presidents to move ever so much closer to Vladimir Putin in Russia, which is exactly what Donald Trump wants. He wants to be an autocrat. And right now he feels he can just walk over the spineless Democrats and they're not going to do a damn thing. He couldn't care less about contempt of Congress. He couldn't care less about going into the courts. He loves it. And in fact, even if he gets an adverse verdict in the court, he'll just say it was rigged, and he'll follow the example of his favorite president, Andrew Jackson, who reportedly said after an adverse Supreme Court decision, Chief Justice Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Only impeachment is the proper, appropriate constitutional check on this president.
Professor Allan Lichtman's book is The Case for Impeachment. He's a political historian, also a professor at American University in Washington, D.C. So appreciate your time again on the program today.
Awesome, David. Take care.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So yesterday we talked about this New York Times story that exposed that Donald Trump's tax returns between 1985 and 1994 show that Trump lost more than $1.1 billion during that 10-year period, paying no federal taxes in 8 of those 10 years. And the reactions from right-wingers have been varied, and some of them are pretty interesting. One approach from the right was, oh, don't focus on the content of the report. Don't focus on the substance of the New York Times story. Focus on the fact that the New York Times got this information about Trump and that they are bad for doing it, and somebody needs to be held accountable. So here's one example of that reaction from the right. This is Turning Point USA flunky Charlie Kirk tweeting, sort of a perfect prototypical example of concern trolling. He tweeted, quote, "Who leaked the misleading Trump tax information to the New York Times? Why did they publish it? Why didn't they report the leaker to authorities? Section 8 of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights says knowingly disclosing tax information is punishable by prison. Who is responsible for this hit job?" So that was one. We see this all the time when it comes to any reports based on leaked information. If you like the leaked information, you focus on the content and not how it was leaked. If you don't like the content of the information, you ignore the content and you focus only on how did this information leak to begin with. Classic strategy employed more by the right than the left, but the left also sometimes will employ that strategy. A totally different approach was the approach taken by Fox and Friends, which is to argue that this New York Times report proves how fantastic a business person Donald Trump is. But they did it in this very strange word salad sort of format. Here's Brian Kilmeade with his take. And again, I don't know if you want to call it word confetti or word salad, just struggling to use the English language to communicate anything of meaning. Take a look.
He's a bold businessman, which is chronicled here. There's nothing about this article that should surprise anybody that got the Daily News and New York Post throughout the last 10 years. Just give details. Here's an example. He said pass-through income. So, for example, there might be an incentive to go buy that building, to buy that casino, because I'll take a loss this year in order on my tax returns because I want to buy for a rainy day. I have the resources. He goes, there was a time that he was actually building his empire. The information focused year by year at a time of gathering loss. He bought his partners out at Trump Tower, the Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino. He bought an apartment building in West Palm Beach for $43 million and business losses for $68.7 million. For us, or at least for me, I can't imagine having that much money, spending that much money, and being in debt. For him, it makes sense. He's buying now, building it up because he had confidence. He knows the properties would be worth more. The properties began to build in '86. He bought, in '87, he spent $29 million on a yacht. The market crashed the next day. So no problem. He held on to it. He bought a shuttle operation. It didn't do too well, but he held on to it. But when he sells it, he takes the loss on his taxes. So for you or I, maybe buying a summer home is a big move, or maybe even a trailer. But for Donald Trump, he says, I got some money, but I want to really expand my empire. I want to take chances. That's what he's done through his entire life, as a personality, as a host, as a businessman. Well, and guess what? Not all of us win on everything we buy.
I think that's how the voter feels.
Absolutely.
So then in comes another one of the genius co-hosts of Fox and Friends, Ainsley Earhardt, and she actually calls all of this extremely impressive. She's impressed that Trump was able to lose more than $1.1 billion.
It is an interesting look, though, at how New York City real estate developers work in the 80s and the 90s.
If anything, you read this and you're like, wow, it's pretty impressive, all the things that he's done in his life. It's beyond what most of us could ever achieve.
I don't know that there's any suggestion that he broke the law.
Yeah.
I think the suggestion is simply that he used the tax laws to his benefit.
Yeah, that's the takeaway. Steve Doocy and Ainsley Earhardt just so impressed by Donald Trump in every way. And unfortunately, I hate to say it because I'm always newly depressed by the lack of limits to the ignorance that people will fall for in this country. A lot of people are falling for this. And I want to clarify before we go any further. Trump is a terrible president because his policies are a disaster, right? Trump's not a terrible president because he lost money in the 80s and 90s. Whether he made money or lost money in the 80s and 90s, our analysis of his policy today would be the same, right? It's a disaster. The reason that this actually matters is that Trump's sole credential for even running for president from the beginning is that he knows how to run businesses, that his businesses are successful, and that he would run the country the way that he runs his businesses. So that's why when people say, oh, Trump losing $1 billion was a strategy, we have to pick it apart because it's actually the basis for Trump being president that so many of his followers actually cite and lean on. Now, let's pick it apart. It is true that sometimes wealthy people or businesses will show or create losses on purpose for strategic tax purposes. It's also possible that Donald Trump did this during some years for which we have not seen his taxes. The New York Times article that we've been reporting on this week doesn't show that. Trump lost amounts of money that go way beyond what would be logical with the idea that Donald Trump is trying to deliberately limit the amount of tax that he pays. When you do that, you try to keep your losses sort of in line with the gains that you're trying to offset. What Donald Trump lost in these years, in most of those years between 1985 and 1994, goes way beyond what you would do as a strategy to reduce or to try to zero out your tax liability. There's no reason to go hundreds of millions of dollars beyond the most advantageous amount for reducing taxes, other than you genuinely and honestly lost money. And unfortunately, you've got people like Charlie Kirk and the three clowns on Fox and Friends who are just good enough at changing the narrative, in part to how did this leak, and in part to Trump is really smart for doing this and we should actually be impressed by him, that the narrative of Trump is good for the country because he's good at business continues to spread and perpetuate itself like a virus, which is quite frankly what it is. We've got to pick it apart, not because Trump's policy is good or bad based on whether he lost money in 1987, but we've got to pick it apart because this is his only credential. This is the credential that his supporters claim is the reason why he deserved to be elected president. And that one credential immediately crumbles like a very poorly built structure as soon as you analyze it with even the most minute critical analysis. There's a recent report that indicates that 71% of anti-Semitic incidents in the United States last year were committed by right-wingers, which I don't think comes as a surprise. Comes as a surprise to most people. And this came up during my debate about free speech with Tim Pool on our YouTube channel earlier this week, which, by the way, is now archived on YouTube. I encourage you to watch it. There's some interesting stuff in there. And it's important to understand that not all anti-Semitism is on the right, but according to Anti-Defamation League data, about 71% of anti-Semitic incidents last year were committed by right-wingers. Also, not surprisingly, there's a new report out which exposes that there are neo-Nazi networks within the United States military. This also is not going to be a surprise to many people. Independent media outlet Unicorn Riot published an investigation which found that there are 11 specific members of a group called Identity Europa, Europa with a V instead of a U as the second letter, which is a neo-Nazi organization. It's operating in the U.S. military, and there are specific members that they know of who are currently in the United States military. Unicorn Riot and HuffPost found that plenty of people who spend their free time posting anti-Semitic memes and praising Adolf Hitler on the internet currently are members of the United States military. Now, the investigations actually name some names, and some of the individuals are relatively high ranking, including a lieutenant colonel who's a doctor in the Army Reserves, as one example. And a few months ago, at the end of 2018, ProPublica did their own investigation and exposed that there's another neo-Nazi network with members in the military. It's a group called the Atomwaffen Division, which focuses on recruiting on college campuses and distributing flyers. And members of the Atomwaffen Division have been implicated in 5 murders in the last 2 years. Now, some of their members have been tied to plots to bomb synagogues and nuclear power plants, and they have active members who are currently in the United States military. And none of this really is news, right? There was a poll from the Military Times a few years ago where 25% of military members said they encountered white nationalism in the ranks. And that number is probably higher, but I would understand that there are probably some people in the military that don't want to admit that they've encountered white nationalism in the military. So it might seem sort of obvious that an organization that lets you carry guns, it might let you go to war, maybe you'd get to kill people, that would attract violent fascist elements of society. So in a sense, it is obvious, but it's not just the military that's at issue. It's really a cultural issue. And what I mean by that is, if you look at other countries, yes, the military is a job where you carry guns and maybe you get to kill people, and that's more likely to appeal to violent fascist elements. But the culture surrounding war and masculinity and all of these other issues works as a sort of exacerbating factor in the United States, where you have a huge contingent that supports aggressive foreign policy. You've got the problem of our relationship to guns. You have lack of access to mental health. You have right now a president whose rhetoric has inflamed this type of violent ideology. So, of course, you end up with a military that contains these extreme elements. And my point is, even if the military in some general way is more likely to attract people predisposed to violence or to wanting to have the opportunity to maybe kill people or shoot people, it doesn't actually have to be as bad as it is in the United States. The military does provide opportunities to people who might be lacking opportunities, but it also provides opportunities to people with a masculinity complex, to people who have these extreme beliefs in their country's supremacy or their race's supremacy. And to the military's credit in the U.S., they do have formal prohibitions against service members participating in these groups. Of course, they don't catch everybody, and that's really the issue. We have enough problems with the engagements that our presidents choose to involve our military in. We don't also need to aggravate that with extremist fascists inside of the service, and the results of this study are very, very concerning. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I know some people are going to be mad about this voicemail. This is a voicemail from a caller who is sending an angry message to Bernie bros, okay? Don't shoot the messenger. This is not my position. This is what a caller says. Take a listen.
Hey, David, this is Ken from Southern California. Hey, listen, to all those Bernie bros out there, as they call themselves, unless you want 4 more years of the pussy grabber Donald Trump, who is against everything you're for, then even if Joe Biden is the nominee on the Democratic side, you need to vote for him. At least he is for 75 or 80% of what you're for. If you don't want 4 more years of this pussy-grabbing orange piece of shit, to which I don't think this nation can stand, then you Bernie bros better vote for whoever the Democratic nominee is, even if it's Joe Biden. Thanks, David. Bye.
All right. So listen, I mean, very, very, very angry. But there is some important message in there, as I've said before, which is let's make sure that our spirited primary doesn't end up enabling Donald Trump to get reelected. I am a progressive. Therefore, Joe Biden's politics are to my right, and I am going to be supporting someone who is further to the left. But if Biden's the nominee and it's Biden versus Trump, I'm voting for Biden. I've made it clear, and I think that that's the primary message there from Ken calling in from Southern California. We've got a great bonus show for you today. Become a member or a patron to get instant access, and we'll speak more then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.